you first start by giving everybody just the bullet points of what happened with the last negotiations, the ones in 2023 that ended in strikes? Like, what was on the docket there? Just
Why
some
are
quick.
you? Why are you asking me? Because my opinion is that nothing meaningful happened during the last strike.
What was on the line?
Okay.
And what were the contention points at the time? And we'll dive into what actually happened there, but just give us a summary of what was going on. This way everyone can kind of
let me put on my hat of neutrality, my Swiss hat of neutrality.
There you go. Looks great on you.
These were the reasons that SAG went on strike, and why it lasted so long. So, as off-white plain as I can be, the issues were residuals, introduction of AI into the industry. Those were the two main ones. I'm trying to remember what the other things are, because those were the two things that pissed me off the most. I'm trying to stay neutral.
Yeah, the streaming residuals was probably the biggest issue.
There was also things about movie stars getting paid $20 million a picture. Meanwhile, and everyone else working on that project was making pennies. The whole pay structure was being addressed.
Right, which was the other piece, was just pay in general. So the last strike focused mostly on the residuals thing that was brought on because streaming had replaced traditional TV residuals. Up until that point,
right,
you make a television show or you make a movie, when it gets played on reruns, there would be some sort of check that comes in afterward. With streaming, right, those things happen less, and streaming wasn't working into that contract.
I remember. So this is subcategory of the residuals, right? Okay, so these are the reasons that we went on strike. Residuals, the introduction of AI into the industry, transparency. That was the other major issue. And the reason that that's sort of bundled with residuals is because you can't accurately calculate residuals without transparency in terms of viewership and actual profit margin and box office numbers.
Yeah, I don't know that I would look at transparency as its own thing, but I do think that was part for both of those things.
Well, you need transparency for a lot of different things because yes, it is something that impacts residuals, but it's also transparency in terms of pay. We talked in a previous episode about technically, if you're a SAG actor or you're working on a SAG affiliated project, you would make money off of if you brought your own wardrobe. But that has to be transparently and accurately reported to the union in order for you to get that benefit. Same with when meals are called, what your turnaround is. All of these transparency things were a negotiating point in the last strike.
I think that the third tentpole was just pay in general. And I think the transparency thing you're talking about was kind of wrapped up into other pieces, because the agreement that eventually happened included, some guide rails for AI, but there was transparency that was required on studios' half when they're using AI. I don't want to get it too ahead of ourselves here, but I think transparency was baked in. I don't think transparency was a topic in and of itself. They weren't picket lining for transparency, but it was one of the methods in which you can facilitate the negotiations on the other thing.
Sure.
Hey, if you want to do these things, we need to be more transparent about it, and that will help fix some of the problems. So I think the three tentpoles as a whole were the streaming residuals, the introduction of AI into the workspace, and pay in various forms. I think those were the big three things. They, had a impasse for quite a while. The WGA as well as the SAG-AFTRA unions eventually went on strike. And I think that lasted for 100 something days, 118, I want to say.
Yeah, I know that it was a record-breaking strike in the sense of length, but I didn't follow specifically how long the strike was. I know that ultimately, as far as a negotiation matters, the length of a strike matters, but I wasn't following it to the day.
I think it was about 118 days, something like that. It was close to that. And to your point, that matters in the sense of that hurts both sides, right? Because people picketing aren't getting paid. so it's hurting their wallets, and the studios aren't producing new stuff, which is also hurting the companies. So
Right.
everybody, in theory, should have motivation to come to some sort of agreement. This way, everybody can get back to work, and everybody gets paid together, arm in arm, and everybody can go on with their happy.
So before I get into my personal thoughts, so I still have my Swiss hat of neutrality on. That's going to be a thing. We're going to like actually sell Swiss hats of neutrality, and it will say Swiss hat of neutrality. Um,
Let's do it, and
but
you should wear it. Although you're not neutral very often, you have a strong opinion, so like it would
I
be have to be a very dedicated time to put your hat on, and then when you take it off, we know we're about getting ready to rumble.
So one of the reasons that this was a record-breaking strike is because SAG's position was that they are willing to negotiate in good faith and they're willing to come to the table if the AMPTP, which is the organization that conglomerizes all of the studios, if they're
Mhm.
willing to come to the table in good faith. And SAG had reached out multiple times throughout the strike saying these are the deal points that we would like to discuss. And the AMPTP's stance was we're not going to talk about that. And that was like the reason that the strike went on for as long as it did. And again, this is my hat of neutrality. I'm not saying that the AMPTP was
Yeah,
right
these
or
are.
wrong in that stance. That was just what their stance was SAG wanted to
Well, did
discuss
you
those things
did you
and they were just like,
hear supposedly, and I think it has been leaked since this was originally rumored, but supposedly there was some sort of document that surfaced, like an internal memo or email or something, where I don't remember if it was the AMPCP or one of the studios, but there was some kind of comment that was made that it was let's try to drag this out as long as possible or delay negotiations because it will hurt them in their wallet, which is a tactic that you can
yeah.
use in negotiations, I guess, because you want the other side to be more motivated to cave. But it
Mhm.
sounded like they were intentionally trying to delay the process because they wanted more concessions from the Actors Guild and the Writers Guild. And they've after that came out, several studios distanced themselves from that. But then their actions, to your point, kind of coincide with that because there were times that it was early in the process where the guilds were like, "Hey, let's talk," and the other side was the studios were saying like, "Well, yeah, we'll get back to you. We'll get back to you, and we can talk about it." But then they would go days and weeks without saying anything. So it doesn't seem like they were actually trying to find time to get to the table. They were just trying to delay it. This way would put
Yeah.
extra pressure on the actors.
So this is when I will have to take off my hat of neutrality because I don't know that I can say anything that would be of a neutral stance in response to that because I do remember there was something to that effect. I don't remember seeing specifically a memo, but I do remember that they were leveraging this tactic of, well, if we stonewall, if we
Yeah.
hold our position, then eventually they will cave. And as far as strike tactics go, like strike negotiations and strike tactics go, when a workforce initially strikes, it hurts the workers more in the beginning because there's an immediate impact to workers.
Yeah.
The
Well, a
longer the
company's
strike,
pockets are bigger, right? I mean, it's a big company with millions behind it.
right.
And
So
what
the
a lot of people don't realize, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I do think it's an important note that when people hear about these strikes, they're thinking, oh, like the Tom Cruises and the Henry Cavills and these people that are these A-list celebrities with deep pockets as well. But most of the people that are part of these unions are not them. I mean, they're people that are making $40,000 a year, maybe
maybe,
less. I mean, they're people in
yeah.
pursuit of trying to get to that level, but they're not these Hollywood elites that other people are thinking of. So a lot of times everyone's like, oh, boo hoo, the millionaires can't whatever. That's a small fraction of the people affected. It's like,
1%.
do you,
That's 1%. Well, maybe it's a little bit more than 1% because, or maybe a little bit less than 1%. And I'll remind everybody of this figure, which was a big talking point during the strike in 2023, which is the number of actors who are in SAG and qualify for their benefits is 1%. And there's something on the magnitude of like 160,000 SAG members. It
I think
might be
it's
more.
more than that, isn't it?
It
I
might be
thought it
more.
was
I don't.
like Oh, I can't. I don't want to just throw out a number because I might be way off, but I think it's more than that.
Could be more.
There is a large group. We should look it up because it's a ton of people that are SAG members, but most of those do not make the type of money that people
Yeah,
associate
it's
with like a Hollywood
1%
actor.
of it's 1% of the SAG membership that make enough to get their benefits. And in order to get your benefits, you need to, I mean, this is a lot of money for a performer, but it's like a measly sum in terms of like an annual earning. But you have to make $23,000 from being a performer. So that's from a SAG affiliated project. You have to make $23,000 a year in order to qualify for benefits, which you can't live on 23,000, but that's the threshold to get benefits.
So it's 180,000 people that are
Oh, I
part
was
of
close. I
SAG-AFTRA.
said
Yeah.
160.
Yeah, you were close. And then for the WGA, which was also on strike at the time, it's another about 15,000. So it's a lot of people. And if you're talking 1% of that, it's a small percentage of people that are making the type of money that we normally associate with actors. And that's why it's not so much the Hollywood elites can't whatever. I mean, these are people that are, working 3, 4 jobs as they pursue this career because
Yeah.
it's not easy, especially if you're somebody that's in LA or
And
you're in New
it's
York.
it's to some degree there's like infighting, and we can get into this a little bit later because there's also infighting on the AMPTP side, but there's infighting within SAG because you have these people who are in that 1%, and I kind of hate to call it the 1% because that now has social connotation, but
Sure.
just factually speaking, there's this A-list class of actors in SAG who are making millions and millions of dollars, and their interest just doesn't align with the working actor who is barely making enough to doing their side hustle, barely making enough, and not even qualifying for the SAG benefits because they don't book enough work and they don't make enough money from being an actor. So there's a conflict there because the A-list can hold out for much longer than the working actor, than the working class actor who's not even qualifying. And these people also, there's infighting in the sense that their pay is directly taking away from the working actor's pay. Because one of the things that was tackled during the strike was the pay structure, and that Tom Cruise shouldn't be making $20 million if the background guy is making 120 for the day.
Yeah, and this is the part that it starts to lose me a little bit too, because part of the contract negotiation is setting up minimums for how much somebody can get paid based on their involvement in the project. But when you have people like the Tom Cruises or anybody else at that level, they are negotiating their own rates outside of that. So SAG doesn't say what the most is that you can make. It is just here's the minimum for the position type,
Right.
which I think is fine. And I'm not going to knock a Tom Cruise because he's able to pull or command a higher salary because of who he
Sure.
is. You know what I mean? Like the
No,
guy
I agree
has
with
done
that.
he's paid his dues. He's gotten to his point where people do buy tickets to see him. So if he's making millions, that's great. And I also think it is saying something that you have these big stars that were out there on the picket fences with everyone else at the time that were trying to fight for the rights of people that are not getting paid what they are. And a lot of them were putting some of their salaries into the fund to help keep them afloat during the strike too, because they realized that it matters. I remember at the time they were asking Bob Iger about it. It was the day that they were going to the negotiation table for the first time. Bob Iger was with a bunch of other studio heads on like a weekend retreat. I forget what the name of their yearly event was, some kind of like somewhere they just go have like, and somebody caught him and asked him for an interview. And he's like, it's just not realistic what they want because, there's not enough money for that, whatever. He's making 8 figures a year.
Mm-hmm.
He's got an 8-figure salary, multiple yachts, whatever. Like, why is it falling on the hundreds of thousands of people that are making 40,000 or less a year?
Well, I think that you can make the same. Wait. Hold on, hold on. I think that you can make the same argument though, because if you're going to say that Tom Cruise, it's totally cool for him to make 20 million if that's what he pulls, then Bob, you can make the same argument about Bob
I'm
Iger.
not, no.
And
The difference is I'm not faulting him for earning that, because if he wants to negotiate that rate and a company is willing to pay him that, God bless him. But you can't turn around and say there's not money for that in the company because you negotiated, you're the company. That would be like Tom Cruise, saying like, hey, like we shouldn't spend this much money on jobs, but then he's still holding his
I think
salary
it's
where it's
wait,
at.
hold on.
That's contradictory to me.
It's more complicated than that because if Tom Cruise, and this is what I think the economic argument was, because you're right. I am not faulting Tom Cruise for going into a negotiation and saying I am worth $20 million. And the company has to square that, or the production company that is producing the project has to square that financially. And what ends up happening is the project has a budget. So if I have to take $20 million of that budget and allocate it to Tom Cruise, where do I need to make budget cuts in order to make that viable so that I can buy Tom Cruise? It's an economics question. So what ends up happening a lot of the times is supporting roles get downgraded. So supporting roles in movies get downgraded to day players. Guest stars are getting downgraded to co-stars because you can pay those positions less.
Right.
And
You're
that's
playing
what
the game
happens.
of switching the titles this way. It could classify as the
Right.
as the
So
cheaper
that's what
alternative.
happens, and that was one of the things that was being fought for. So I agree with you. I don't fault Tom Cruise for being able to pull 20 million, but then the production company has to say, well, then this is how much money we can spend on a production, and we can get into executive pay. But I don't think that that's something that is really directly related to the strike because that's a
No,
separate internal
I just
company
think it's
thing.
hypocritical to say your wants are not realistic when you are making 8 figures a year and you're telling this of people that just want enough basic income to afford health care, like just general health care.
Sure.
It's a bad look to me. Not to mention that the studios are the ones that put this in this position after the pandemic anyway, because their other argument was, hey, we still haven't recovered from 2020. Theaters aren't doing as well. We're not making as much money in ticket sales. And yeah, well, whose fault is that? They're the ones that made the shift to start putting everything on streaming sooner because that was going to be their big platform. It's like, let's load up the streaming content. Let's pump out as much stuff we can, shorten our theatrical release and put it on the stream because we want to build our streaming service to compete with Netflix. And that has not worked out for anyone. I mean, all these companies are losing tons of money still on their streaming providers, hoping that it'll pay off for them in the long run. But as of right now, that has shortened their income from theatrical, and it's trained the audience to go, I don't need to go to the theater because it'll be on streaming soon. They were stuff they were putting concurrently on both platforms. I mean, these are things that you can't use the argument that the money isn't there because here's where the industry, when you are the one who did that. So that's your problem. You don't get any money if the actors aren't making the projects for you.
I do agree that to some degree the issue was created by the AMPTP companies and more specifically Netflix. Like a lot of people were pointing fingers at Netflix during the 2023 strike, but I think that this is actually a good segue to sort of get us on to what do we think is going to happen. So going back to what I was saying before about a strike tactic that is very commonly leveraged on usually the employer's side is dragging out the strike because they know how long they can last, and it's typically going to be longer than the workers can last. And there is an economic theory that sort of suggests when a strike becomes beneficial to the workers. The problem is, can the workers make it to that point? And the answer is pretty much always no. And I think we saw that in 2023, where we struck for very, very long, but not long enough. And I think that was the problem. So that brings us to this contract negotiation, which is I think that there will be a strike because I think that there is still heavy contention about all of these issues, but I don't think we're going to strike for long enough. I think it won't be anywhere close to as world breaking or ground shattering, and it will be basically a formality just to so that SAG can say we fought for our membership.